What's up, guys? Happy Saturday, November 12th, 2022. A lot of sports today, but 6 games on the NBA docket over at No House Advantage. And in today's video, we're going to talk about a couple of those games, at least key points of interest as we explore the pick'em side of the No House Advantage house. If you guys aren't on NHA, you should be. And if you haven't signed up yet, there's a link in the description below that you must click. NHA is bringing you the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today, where you can play in pick'em contests versus other people for a shot at winning up to $25K or more in cash. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, and climb the leaderboard when you make correct picks, or test your skills versus the house, and you can 20x your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet up to 5-player prop, over unders, or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including the NFL, college football, the World Cup coming soon, and NBA. That's why we're here. Sign up now with the link below to get a first match deposit bonus up to $50. Be sure to check out all of our NHA content and free projections over at Stokastic, which you can also find in the description below. You should really be in the description below. There's good stuff in there. Well, today we're going to talk about the $15 entry slam dunk, 15K prize pool, 5K to first. We're going to explore some of the pick'em lines that they have offered and see if we can't carve out a couple that we want to lean on tonight in our hunt for money. Money's good. Click that thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, let me know what you're liking there, and remember, as news develops, your edge does too. These lines are static, they do not change, they do not react to news like you and I. Let's get to the picks. Number 1, John Collins, 28.5 points, rebounds, assists. I'm leaning the under. This season, John Collins is sustaining 5-year lows in shot attempts per game, assists per game, and points per game, averaging about 22 points, rebounds, and assists per game. This line at this PRA line at NHA already seems too high at 28.5, and it doesn't hurt that he's up against a front court featuring Joel Embiid and a 76ers team that is second slowest in pace, fewer implied possessions. Stokastic projections have John Collins at 22.08 points, rebounds, assists. That gives us a 90% probability of hitting the under 28.5. So that's pick number 1. Moving forward to our second pick, let's talk about Miles Turner, Timmy Turner, over 12.5 points. The Pacers center has shown a high involvement in this team's offense this season. His points per 36 minutes this season is 22.3. That's a career best. Foul trouble and injuries have stifled him at times, but whenever he can stay on the court for over 30 minutes, he blows by this 12.5-point line often. Tonight, the Pacers are actually home hook favorites against the Toronto Raptors, who are still without Pascal Siakam, so the minutes should be there. Hopefully, the fouls won't. Stokastic projections like Miles Turner.
that every single card, there's a different NFT project that they're pushing now?
Yeah, one of the fighters is always wearing it.
But there's so it's either because now they're pushing the Rainmakers DraftKings stuff, but they have UFC Strike. There's like a Tops one or something they're doing before. It's every few weeks the UFC has a different. There's always some NFT product that they're pushing on the show, and there's always new ones, and they fall and then they fade away.
They all flop. NBA Top Shot was like the one that sustained it for a while.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Stokastic MMA Live Before Lock show. So, a little bit different this week, and I'm really excited for it. I'm back, I'm hosting, and I'm here with Josh Harris. We've never done, not only an MMA show together, we've never done any shows together. We've interacted in Discord a few times. We've messaged on Twitter here and there, show together. We've never done that before. I'm excited for it. I hope you guys are too. While you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're sponsored by PrizePicks today. Josh, I imagine doing a show with me. This has got to be what, top 2, top 3 moment in your life?
Top 1. I'm going to put my marriage number 2, show with Greg number 1. This is very exciting. My wife is she's hiring a divorce lawyer right now, but no, this is a great card. I'm filling in for Pete today. He had a scheduling conflict. Should be back next week. This is a great card. I have hosted the show a few times. My big old head doesn't fit in the frame as usual, like Heed from So I Married an Axe Murderer, but yeah, I've been on the show a few times. It's been a little bit of a rough card. This is a very, very good card. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and so the way that we've got 14 fights. We're going to break down as many as we can and try to say which ones we're prioritizing for DFS. And then as per usual, any questions you guys have, super chats. If you're in Discord and you're watching, at me and we'll answer your questions. But let's start with the main event here. Israel Adesanya taking on Alex Pereira. And I very rarely go heavy on Izzy fights for DFS purposes because he's not a very high output striker. He doesn't typically wrestle or grapple. And then you get to these situations too, where I think he's gotten to a point as a champion now. He's just very risk adverse. He's not willing to put himself in the line of danger. He typically knows that he could stand at distance and can point fight his way to a lot of 50-45 victories. As a result, his recent wins, 85 fantasy points in a decision win over Jared Cannonier, 75 in a decision win over Robert Whittaker, 84 in a decision win over Marvin Vettori. Before that, he had the loss and move up to light heavyweight and took on Jan Blachowicz. Only scored 35 points in a 5-round decision loss. He's projected to be really popular right now. One of the most popular fighters on the card. We have him projected for 47% ownership. What are you doing with Izzy at that kind of ownership, Josh?
Yeah, it's a good question because normally Adesanya upper in the 9Ks. He's down at 8,600 on DraftKings today, and that makes it a more interesting conversation because, like you mentioned, he isn't very high output. He lands 3.93 significant strikes per minute. He only absorbs 2.67. So like he's very risk averse. Like you said, he doesn't have high output and he just doesn't score well in the decision. Even in that Whittaker fight, he had a knockdown and he still barely cracked 80 or didn't even get to 80. So it's just a question of, do you think he has finishing equity? Because Alex Pereira, as you know, this fight has some history, knocked him out in a kickboxing match in 2017. Now that was 5 years ago. And Adesanya has turned into one of the best mixed martial artists in the world. But the one thing that, Alex Pereira is going to do, he's going to come forward. He's going to pressure him. Now, Adesanya is a very good counter striker. As you saw in the Gastelum fight, he had 4 knockdowns in that fight. And I'm not saying he's going to knock down Alex Pereira 4 times, but, if Pereira keeps coming forward, starts to gas a little bit, you get later into the fight, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, Pereira might get a little sloppy. He could get hit and finish, but this fight as a whole is only minus 110 to finish, which isn't great odds for a 5-round fight. So realistically, if you're playing 150, I think there's a case to be under the field in GPPs here because there's guys with higher finishing equity around him. There's guys with better finishing equity above him. So when push comes to shove, like I think if I was going to play the main event, it'd be Pereira. That being said, if he doesn't finish early, there's a good chance he gasses out and just loses the decision late.
Yeah, so to me, Izzy probably needs a 1st or a 2nd round finish to be optimal because unless he totally changed up his game plan, which maybe that's possible. He goes to wrestling here because that could potentially be a path to victory. We've just never seen it before from him. So it's something that would be hard for me to project. I think outside of a first or second round knockout for Izzy, he probably doesn't put up a very good score for DFS. I'm less than half the field in terms of my exposure to the field's projected exposure, but I still do think Izzy wins the fight. So I'm not super high on Pereira in this matchup either. I'm underweight to both sides of it. I think there's other fights that are better to target, that have more finishing equity, that have more grappling upside. But one thing I did want to ask you is, how much weight do you put into the kickboxing matches when it comes to looking at this fight?
Maybe it matters from like an egotistical standpoint. Like Adesanya, like we've never seen a fighter get in Adesanya's head like Pereira has. Like he's gotten under Izzy's skin. Like it's a matter, like you've seen it in the press conferences. Kickboxing is different from MMA, but I have a feeling like this is going to be a pretty much a kickboxing match. But maybe Adesanya has some tricks up his sleeve. Like Pereira doesn't have good takedown defense. He's just like, I'm big. If you want to take me down, go for it. Like Adesanya could have some sneaky trips, something like that. So this isn't going to be a pure kickboxing match that can grapple up against the cage. Like Adesanya has not landed a takedown in the UFC. He doesn't grapple often at all, really. He hasn't even attempted a takedown. But would I be surprised if Adesanya has some cheeky trip and gets into the mat? No. So while it does worry me that Pereira does have the power to shut Adesanya's lights off. So did Yoel Romero, so did Paulo Costa, so did Vettori, so did Whitaker. And he had great game plans for that. So, maybe it's in his head a little bit because Pierre got him, but I trust his game planning.
Yeah, so just on the kickboxing matches, because they had two of them. One, Pereira won by decision. I rewatched them, and I don't watch a whole lot of kickboxing, but I did think that Izzy won the first fight. And the second fight, to be honest, was not particularly competitive until Izzy got knocked out. Pereira was hurt very badly early in that fight, and Izzy just went to try to finish him, got a little bit overeager, and got caught. To me, I watched that fight and I was like, that wasn't really all that competitive. It kind of to me felt similar to watching like Usman fight against Leon Edwards in their last fight, where it's like, okay, I saw that fight play out, and based on what I saw there, I think Edwards loses to Usman more often than not. He just happened to land a finishing strike towards the tail end of the fight. I thought the Adesanya Pereira fight was fairly similar in the last looking one that they had. So I do favor Izzy to win, but I don't really love this fight for DFS purposes, and I think it's going over-owned.
Yeah, and you kind of saw that like in Pereira's first couple fights in his UFC debut against Andre Michailidis. He got taken down and controlled for the first round. Then he won by flying knee. In the second fight against Bruno Silva, got taken down, controlled for the first round. He's not a very good round winner unless he knocks you out. So like, unless Pereira wins by knockout, he's probably going to lose a decision.
All right, let's answer some of these super chats. We got a couple of them coming in. First from Sam Pierce. What happened to the Thursday MMA show? On hiatus for right now. And then thoughts on Meatball versus Blanchfield. So for this, I think you can make a case that the line is a little bit wide. But even with that said, Blanchfield is one of the biggest favorites on the card. And she has a path to very, very high upside in this fight, because we've seen Molly McCann take on other wrestlers, and it generally not gone well for her. So I'm going to pull up the stats from the Laura Procopio fight, where she got taken down a shit ton of times in that fight. And Blanchfield is significantly better as a wrestler.
Procopio's wrestling is not great. Yeah.
So Molly McCann in the fight against Laura Procopio was taken down 7 times out of 9 attempts. So 77% takedown accuracy for Procopio in that fight. And then was able to control Molly McCann for 11 minutes and 43 seconds on the ground there. So if Blanchfield is a better wrestler than Procopio, which I think she is, and you could definitely make a case that McCann has gotten better as a defensive wrestler. We haven't seen it yet, so I can't say that for sure, because after that, the UFC just put her in a lot of favorable matchups for herself. She fought Yi Zhang Kim, who also striker, Luana Carolina, striker, and then Hannah Goldie in her last fight. Not really anything, if we're being honest. Like no real strengths to be had when it comes to Hannah Goldie. So I think this is a spot where Blanchfield should put up a lot of fantasy points and a lot of offensive wrestling if she wins. The line is really wide, but one of the safer fighters on the card. I don't really have that much interest in McCann. Blanchfield, if I'm paying up for any fighter, it's going to be Zhang Weili 1 and then Blanchfield 2 in terms of my high-end priorities. What do you make of Blanchfield versus McCann? What do you think about that fight?
Yeah, I like Blanchfield in this fight. You know, McCann struggles against wrestlers. If Blanchfield struggles to get her down, and in her last fight, Blanchfield went 0 for 4 on takedowns against JJ Aldridge, who has pretty good takedown defense. But if she struggles to get McCann down, McCann is live on the feet. That being said, Blanchfield's going to spam takedowns. If she gets her down once or twice around, she's going to hold her down. Like, McCann doesn't have the best get up game. She likes to play guard, avoid big damage, but Blanchfield seems like a safe option for cash. If you're into cash games, she should be in your cash lineup. Probably she has a high floor, high ceiling. You can realistically, if Blanchfield's successful with takedowns, you know, she could possibly get her down five times, hold her down for 10 minutes, land some ground and pound, put up over 100 points. Whether it's optimal, that remains to be seen. That's a question you have to ask yourself in GPPs, but she does land 5.69 significant strikes per minute. So it's not like she's not doing anything with those takedowns. She's landing ground and pound. So, you know, I think she's a high floor, high ceiling play, more suited for cash, but I think there is definite upside for GPP winning lineup.
Next super chat we have here, it's from our guy Coach CS111. Hello, gents. Question: why do you think your top stacks is Izzy projected for 101 points after everything you said? It's the nature of it being a 5-round fight where a lot of times we just project a lot of those fights higher. For me personally, though, I do think that it looks a little bit high at first glance. Just if you look at the wins for Izzy so far in his career, I mentioned the other recent ones: 86 fantasy points, 75, 85, a loss where he scored 35. The Paulo Costa win was a 2nd-round finish, and he put up 102. He had the win over Yoel Romero. That was a 5-round decision, and he put up 49 fantasy points in a 5-round decision win there. I mean, there is a possibility that Izzy decides that he's going to try to wrestle a little bit or try to at least hold Pereira up against the cage. But to me, if you're asking me more likely is going to be over or under 101 fantasy points, I would take the under on that mark. Super chat from Sam Pierce. Best DK captain and best contrarian DK captain. So I haven't built out captain lineups. I could do that really quick, though. Have you built out any of the captain lineups on?
I haven't yet,
DK?
but I think I have a good idea for contrarian. I think Dan Hooker would be a very interesting contrarian captain pick here. Or if you're, you know, looking for an underdog who is actually overpriced considering his odds, Matt Frivola could be a very boomer bust contrarian captain pick here as well.
I'm pulling up the captain mode right now. I do like the Dan Hooker call. By the way, I bet Dan Hooker outright to win today. I think that he is way undervalued in this spot. You and I were talking about that a little bit before, and we could talk about that a little bit more in detail. Kingslayer is saying Azatar captain. He is huge upside. I do not think he's going to be contrarian. No, I think he's one of the most popular plays on the slate today. Also,
yeah, he's massive odds value on him.
Yeah, he's also not in the captain mode on DK, which also takes him out of consideration. I would say so. Hooker won for sure. I think whichever side you favor of the Chandler Poirier fight, I think that the winner of that is going to end up scoring very well, just because how every single Michael Chandler fight has ever played out and how every single Dustin Poirier fight has ever played out. That is going to be a train wreck. I think the odds are a little bit too wide for that fight, but whoever wins, I expect to score very well, and more likely than not, that is ending inside the distance. Probably either Chandler in the first round, and then if he's not able to get Poirier out, then I expect Poirier to just wear him down, finish him either the second or the third. So that would be me. I would say the winner, whichever side you prefer, Poirier, Chandler. That would be my contrarian captain pick.
Yeah, that Dustin Poirier or Michael Chandler Gaethje was at Madison Square Garden last year. That was an absolute train wreck as well. Like, that was just a car crash. Man, Poirier, Chandler. I think Poirier, like, everyone's like, oh, this is going to be like the Poirier McGregor fight. This is going to be like the Poirier Eddie Alvarez fight. Chandler has the chance to wrestle and get Poirier in a bad position. Poirier doesn't have the best defensive wrestling, so Chandler is going to be very live, especially early. His gas tank is a bit questionable. His chin is a bit questionable, but there's going to be some spicy moments early in that fight.
Yeah. By the way, people asking about stacking fights, 14 fight card, no need to today, especially when there's so many fights that are expected to finish inside the distance. No need to stack on this kind of card. We haven't talked about the co-main event yet, and I want to know what you make of Zhang Weili versus Carla Esparza. It seems like most people are giving Carla next to no chance to win the fight. If I just look at a lot of the narrative that people are throwing out online about this fight, have you ever watched One Punch Man?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, it's an anime. I think a lot of people think that a One Punch Man fight is how this Zhang Weili Carla Esparza fight is going to go, where she's just going to touch her once and Carla Esparza is going to explode or something like that. Because people are not expecting this to be competitive. I think Esparza is more live than most people are making her out to be. We have not seen Zhang Weili successfully defend a takedown now since 2019. I want to say it's been a while because she was taken down. 2 out of 2 times by Rose Namajunas in their second fight. Rose didn't attempt to take down in the first fight. Joanna didn't attempt to take down. Andrade, that fight finished early.
I think it was Tisha Torres.
Yeah, Tisha Torres went 0 for 1 on take. So the last time she successfully defended a takedown was the Tisha Torres fight, which was August 31st of 2019. Now, Zhang Weili might be so much physically stronger than Carla Esparza that she just might not be able to get her to the mat. But I think that there's a case to be made here that Esparza is live, and if she does win, it would be via wrestling and grappling, and she put up a pretty decent DK score. I much prefer getting to the co-main event as compared to the main event. I'm currently about even with the field on Weili and a little bit overweight on Carla Esparza. I like both sides of it.
Yeah, I'm over on Carla Esparza. Well, I think 6,800. Yeah, she's 6,800. She has one path to victory here, but she is so undervalued as a wrestler in this division that that's why you see the odds the way they are. Like Rose Namajunas in her fight with Zhang took her down twice, controlled her for 7 minutes. All Zhang really did was just kick her on the ground. She has no way to get up. She wasn't looking to get up. Carla Esparza has nasty ground and pound if she can get her on the mat. Now, you saw that against Yao Xiaonan, butchered that name, but Carla Esparza took her down 3 times, controller, and just absolutely bloodied her up on the mat. Now, if Carla Esparza wins this fight, she's going to be optimal because it's going to come from wrestling. It's going to come in ground and pound. The problem is Zhang is a beast for that division, right? So it could end up looking like Esparza versus Joanna, their first fight, where Esparza couldn't even attempt to take down because she just got blitzed and got knocked out. But I think if Carla survives the first barrage and can get her to the mat one time, she'll get confidence. She probably will win the round because Zhang will not be able to get up. Maybe she learned how to get up. Maybe she trained that after the Rose Namajunas fight. But we haven't seen it. So you have to expect if Esparza gets the fight to the mat here, she's going to dominate the round. I think if Esparza can be successful with takedowns, avoid the massive power, I think she can win this fight. The one thing that I haven't seen many people talk about on Twitter is Zhang has decent offensive wrestling, and we haven't seen Esparza off her back too much. So I think if Zhang mixes in takedowns offensively, I think that could be another way she can avoid getting taken down herself.
If she's able to effectively offensive wrestle, then this will be so ridiculously uncompetitive. By the way, if I do expect if Carla loses that she gets absolutely destroyed. That is what a lot of her fights look like. So going to pull up the Carla Esparza losses. So she hasn't lost in a while. Her last loss was 2018 against Tatiana Suarez. I think Suarez put up like 170 DK points in that fight, if I remember correctly.
She had 9 takedowns.
Yeah, it was absolute one-way traffic. The Claudia Gadelha fight, that one actually was fairly competitive. Lost to Ronda Marcos. That was really bad. The fight against Joanna, though, she just got absolutely destroyed. That's what I think this fight probably looks like if Esparza doesn't get takedown. She just gets lit on fire the same way Joanna lit her up. But either way, my preferred side of the fight is definitely Zhang Weili. But I like both sides of it, and I'm going to be overweight to both sides. When I'm looking at the 2 title fights, I do like the co-main event better than the main event. Even from a real-life perspective, I'm looking forward to the main event more.
Yeah, I think the main event is a better fight. I think for DFS purposes, the co-main event is a better fight. I just you know, I'm expecting Zhang to be one of the most popular fighters, if not the most popular fighter on the card. So, Esparza is probably going to get ownership just because it's a 5-round fight. It's a championship fight. But 6,800, I think, she definitely should be in your portfolio because she has a legitimate path to victory as long as she doesn't get her head detached from her shoulders.
Yeah. By the way, to what Brian is saying in the chat, the timer is just how much time we've left in the show. The DK slate, DK/FanDuel slate doesn't lock until 6 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, there's still some time. Don't panic or anything. But Josh and I are just going to be here until 4:55 Eastern time. Then we're turning over NBA Deep Dive, NBA Live before lock. So check out all the content we have on the YouTube channel. And also, if you guys want access to all of the tools and content that we have on the site, not just for MMA, but all of the sports out there. So we've got MMA, NBA, NFL, pretty much anything you could think of. We have it covered. There's a couple of ways to get in the door for really cheap. Number one, we've got a 3-day free trial access period right now. If you haven't tried out our tools, you can get 3 days for free. But also, we have a deal with BetMGM right now, where if you sign up at BetMGM by clicking on the link below in the description box, and Mike is going to throw the link into the YouTube chat right now, you sign up over at BetMGM and make a new account, you get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum membership, but also you get a $1,000 risk-free bet. So let's say you're really confident in Izzy in the main event today. You could bet $1,000 on him, and even if he loses, you would get refunded in risk-free bets. And in addition to that, you would get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum membership. You don't have to bet $1,000, but you can get up to that refunded on your first bet. Now let's get back to talking about these fights. And we just got a question about the fight that overall I'm most excited to watch today. Sam Pierce is saying, Dustin looks emotional, and last time he fought like this was against Conor and lost. Chandler wins by stoppage. Thoughts? If Chandler wins, it's almost certainly by first-round stoppage. I don't really think he has another realistic path to victory. First-round stoppage, maybe early second round. I love targeting this fight. I think this fight is going to score extremely well no matter who wins. My preferred side is Poirier. I have some concerns that Chandler is potentially a little bit washed at this point. It's easy to forget because of how crazy the highlight reel knockout was against Tony Ferguson. Do you remember he got dropped in the first round by Tony?
Yeah. Like everyone gets hurt in a Michael Chandler fight. It just happens.
And then Tony looked so washed in his follow-up fight against Nate Diaz.
Oh, so bad.
But I do think that Chandler, if he wins, he's going to put up a massive score. He's going to finish early, and he's going to come out fighting for fantasy points in that first round. Chandler fights with his gas on the pedal immediately at the start of every fight. And then if he does not win quickly, he typically fades and loses. We've seen that in basically all of his UFC points to this point. And even going back to Bellator, that was how a lot of his fights went. I think this is another really high priority fight to target. I love both sides. I lean towards Poirier, but I'm overweight to Poirier and Chandler at the moment.
Yeah, this fight is minus 260 to finish. And you look at Chandler's UFC resume, right? He knocked out Dan Hooker in the first. He almost finished Charles Oliveira for the belt. He couldn't get him out of there. He got finished early in the second. He hurt Justin Gaethje in the first, couldn't get him out of there. Somehow that fight went to decision. Like Chandler, that fight could have got stopped 20 different times. Like Chandler took a beating in that fight. And then he got hurt by Tony Ferguson before, he got that meme knockout in the second round. So there's a good chance that both of these fighters get hurt in the first round. Now, if you're talking about durability, I have to favor Poirier. If you're getting hurt by Tony Ferguson this stage in your career, if Poirier lands flush, there's a good chance your lights are going out. But Chandler, if he wrestles, I think he is very live early for a finish because Poirier tends to put himself in really bad positions. He's not a very good defensive wrestler. He defends takedowns at 64%, which is okay, but you saw that Charles Oliveira got him in a tough spot. Eddie Alvarez had a dominant position on him before he got knocked out. Khabib submitted him. Dan Hooker took him down 4 times. You know what I mean? So, I would expect Michael Chandler to come out wrestling a little bit in this first round, swing some bombs and then, look for a takedown. I think he can possibly get him out of there. But the problem is if he doesn't and it gets into the second or third rounds, Poirier, as long as he's still standing, I think can get Chandler out of there.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. And then I assume both sides you like quite a bit in tournaments with that said.
Yeah, I think, Chandler is too cheap for what he can do. So if he wins in the first round by knockout or submission or ground and pound, Like he's gonna be optimal. So I think you have to have both sides in your portfolio here.
Yeah, Chandler wins, he's almost certainly optimal. And then even if Poirier wins, he's fairly likely to be optimal just because of the pace I think this fight is going to be kept at. We look at the fights that Chandler's had in the UFC to this point. Dan Hooker, quick knockout. Oliveira, hurts Oliveira early, and then second round, nothing left in the tank for Michael Chandler. Next fight against Justin Gaethje, puts it on Gaethje a little bit early in the fight. Second, third round, gasses. I don't know how he survived that fight. And then last time, even against Ferguson, somewhat competitive in the early going, and then Michael Chandler basically kicks his head off into the third row and ended Tony Ferguson's career. He's at Harvard now. Did you know that?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's
That's
taking
hilarious.
business classes at
I
Harvard.
didn't realize it was serious, but I guess it is.
Super chat from Eddie Seja. 3 must-haves for DK GPP. All right, so let me sort by my current ownership right now. My favorite overall plays. Weili Zhang, Dustin Poirier. And then the other one, I guess we should talk about this fight as well. So Otman Azatar against Matt Frevola is also another fight that I think we should be getting a ton of exposure to. And another one that I think is going to score really well because Matt Frevola is a moron. Did you see his Twitter yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Matt Frevola has a very clear path to victory here. If Matt Frevola wrestles, he is likely going to win and put up a ton of fantasy points. But Matt Frevola also gets into a lot of dumb striking wars and gets himself knocked out because he's a questionable chin and isn't the best striker in the world. So yesterday, of course, Matt Frevola puts up a poll on his Twitter and says, "Hey guys, I'm going to do whatever you want today. Should I wrestle tomorrow or should I stand and bang?" And of course, because of the way that MMA fans respond, they say stand and bang. And it's hard to take that totally seriously, but it's definitely a concern to me. Azatar is the #1 odds value play on the slate. You guys should be playing him in GPPs, but I think that Frevola is another really good pivot play. And a lot of times, especially on slates like this, I'm looking more so for fights to target than individual fighters to target. And of the fights that we've talked about before, fights like Poirier Chandler, the co-main event, Weili Zhang, Carlos Esparza, I think this is the #1 fight to target of the entire card. Azatar against Frevola. And Frevola is going to go overlooked just because of where he's priced and the line value on Azatar.
Yeah, I think Frevola might be the best leverage play on the slate in GPPs just because you have Adesanya 8,600, Dan Hooker 8,700, Carlos Ulberg 8,400. He's kind of overlooked in that range, but if he doesn't get nuked early, which he has by Marco Polo Reyes, which is an awful loss, and Terrence McKinney, who has massive power for the division, he's, wrestling to victories here. He also somehow survived against Lando Venata to a draw. So, like, if he's standing, he's at least competitive, right? So, yeah, Otman Azatar, 7,700 on DK. He's going to be very popular, probably, easily the most popular fighter under 8K. Yeah. He's had 2 fights, both by first round knockout. He's very aggressive. He's kind of, I don't want to say like front running, but like if he doesn't get you out of there, he could be in trouble. And he has 100% takedown defense in the UFC, but Timu Pakalainen and Karma Worthy aren't wrestlers. So Frevola doesn't go full 70 IQ and he comes in with a wrestling game plan. I think this could be one-way traffic. Now, if he decides to stand and bang, he's going to lose his head. Like, Azatar has massive power. So I think, depending on how you think the fight's going to go, can you trust Frevola to wrestle? I don't know. But if you think he does wrestle, I think you're going to get very good ownership on him because Azatar, under 8K, the favorite, 2 first-round knockouts. He has the game logs. I don't know. Like, it's 250 inside the distance, but the odds are basically even. This is a 50-50. I don't really have a massive lean on this fight.
Yeah, and I think also if you look at even the betting odds right now, where Frevola opened up as the favorite, Azatar's gotten steamed as the week has gone on, but still, Azatar is a -155 favorite to Frevola +135 on the other side. So we're still looking at a fight that's about 60-40. If we were to say the odds are totally accurate, if they were 100% accurate, we'd say that 60-40, Azatar wins a little bit more often than not. But current ownership projections, he's projected for 46% ownership, and Frevola is projected for 9%. That is leverage to me. The scary part is in large field tournaments, if Frevola does not look to wrestle early, he's going to die. And then he's going to score very poorly for DFS. And then we're going to get a super chalky Abin Azatar who's going to put up a massive fantasy score. But just based on what I think the ownership projections are going to be, or based on what the ownership projections are and why I think it's warranted that it's what they are, I think Frevola is the best leverage play on the slate.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Like, and he's sandwiched in a chalky range too. So, like, if you're a 1-3 lineup guy, it is very scary clicking in Matt Frevola. But if he wins, it's most certainly going to be wrestling based. He's going to have some control time. He possibly could have a late finish. Like, I think if you're looking to win a large field tournament, he's got to be in your portfolio.
Yeah,
way
totally.
over. Like, it's like you don't need much to get over 9%. Like, even if he comes in around 20, like, you don't need much to get over the field, especially because Azatar is going to be one of the more popular fighters on the card.
Let's move on to a fighter who, Jersey guy like us, Frankie Edgar. And Frankie Edgar, this is the final fight of his career. He's 41 years old, which is insanely old for a bantamweight. But he's low-key been competitive in recent fights. And I know the results have, well, the Corey Sandhagen fight wasn't, but the Marlon Vera fight, he was winning that fight until he got finished with a minute left in the fight. If Frankie Edgar survives for another minute, his last fight would have been a win over Marlon Vera, who's now pretty close to being in line for a title. But because of how that fight ended, there is massive, massive recency bias, in my opinion, in the line on Chris Gutierrez. And I think the UFC very rarely do this. Typically, when an older fighter is walking out the door, the UFC tries to set up this fighter to lose. They put them in a really difficult matchup that's poor stylistically for them, so that the younger fighter could get some shine off the older fighter. I think the UFC has done the opposite here with Frankie Edgar because Chris Gutierrez has a 63% takedown defense. We've seen him held down on the mat multiple times in losses in the past. And I think that is how this fight, to me, is one of the more likely outcomes. So Frankie Edgar, another fighter who's only projected for single-digit ownership, I think that he is way more live here than the betting line suggests. I did bet Frankie Edgar outright, plus 200 to win on the money line. I also have him plus 350 to win by decision. Are you with me? Do you think is our New Jersey guy Frankie live in this spot?
Oh yeah, he's definitely live there. And you're right about the UFC. UFC did Uriah Faber so dirty, giving him Piotr Jan.
They gave him Piotr Jan on the way out, and they give Frankie Edgar. Here is, sorry to cut you off, but just to kind of paint a picture in terms of the step down in competition. These are the recent fights for Frankie Edgar: Max Holloway, Chan Sung Jung, Pedro Munoz, Corey Sandhagen, Chito Vera. And then he announces retirement like Chris Gutierrez this time. This is not usually the MO for the UFC. The UFC usually would give him like a Sugar Sean O'Malley in this spot. Somebody who could build a younger fighter who's up and coming and could build the name off a legend. I don't think that's what this spot is for Gutierrez. I think they're trying to give Frankie a win as he exits the door, and they've given him the most stylistically friendly matchup possible for him.
Yeah, and Chris Gutierrez has a loss in the past 2 years to Cody Durden, who Frankie Edgar is a better striker than Cody Durden, better wrestler. Well, maybe not at this stage in his career, but Chris Gutierrez, big leg kicker, not much. He won by spinning back fist in his last fight, and that was a very nice back fist. But Frankie Edgar is could he be shot? Yeah, there's certainly possible. He's 41 years old. He dropped down to bantamweight. The Cheeto knockout. He was winning that fight, but like, that knockout was pretty brutal. The Sandhagen knockout was pretty brutal. Maybe Chris Gutierrez touches the chin once and he goes to sleep. But if you're just going off metrics, right, Frankie Edgar just is better here. He doesn't have massive output, 3.79 significant strikes per minute, but he only absorbs 2.81. He lands over 2.3 takedowns per 50 minutes. So, I mean, Gutierrez's takedown defense is okay. It's 73%, but again, got taken down by Andre Ewell, got taken down by Felipe Colares, got taken down by Geraldo de Freitas. You know what I mean? If Frankie decides to wrestle, he's going to have success here. And I think we're looking at, possibly a close decision here.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while, but I think at the time I thought that the Colares and Gutierrez fight should have been a draw. It was a very competitive fight. It ended up being a split decision.
It was a split, yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember giving 2 rounds to Gutierrez, and then I had 1 10-8 in there for Colares. And I don't rate Klarish all that highly. I'm pretty sure he got cut by the UFC. He got TKO'd by Chase Hooper in his last fight, and I think he got cut from the roster. So I think that's a pretty bad result for Gutierrez, even though he came away with the win. So his last win, like you said, the spinning back fist over Dana Bakary, it was a nice highlight, but that's also a really low level competition. So I think this is a pretty favorable matchup for Frankie Edgar. I do not agree with odds on it at all. Edgar is my preferred side of the fight. Gutierrez, if you want to take a shot on just Edgar being 41 years old and being washed, totally live. If Frankie Edgar's chin is totally gone, it would not be the most surprising thing in the world to me. But I think Frankie Edgar maybe has a little bit more left in the tank than what the betting line indicates, and a massive step down in competition for him. And I feel the same about the next fight that's on the card. Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles. I think Hooker, another guy, just like Frankie Edgar, is in a massive step down in competition for him. Because if you look at the fights that we have seen from Dan Hooker recently, it has been nothing but killers. Dan Hooker's strength of schedule is insane. He went up against Arnold Allen fighting at featherweight. He fought Islam Makhachev the fight before. Before that, Nazar Haqparast, that it was a much easier matchup, and Hooker dominated him in that fight. Then before that, gets KO'd by Michael Chandler. Very close fight against Dan Hooker. Win over Paul Felder, win over Al Quinta. This is maybe the easiest fight that we've seen Dan Hooker have in quite some time. I guess since the James Vick fight back in 2019. And I think just because of recent results where Hooker's lost to elite competition and Puelles has won against really weak competition, this betting line is way too close. I think Hooker should be like a minus 300 favorite today.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like you look at Claudio Puelles' resume in the UFC, he lost his debut to Martin Bravo by KO. Then he went on a 5-fight winning streak, but he fought Felipe Silva, Marcos Mariano. The only reason he was in the UFC because he was Anderson Silva's training partner, probably one of the worst UFC fighters of all time. Jordan Levitt, I might have better striking than Jordan Levitt. Chris Gruetzemacher and Clay Guida, who are the same person. And Claudio Puelles won both those fights by knee bar. And, unless you're Ryan Hall, I don't think winning by knee bar is sustainable in the UFC. Like Clay Guida, Chris Gruetzemacher, Jordan Levitt, Marcus Mariano, Felipe Silva. None of those guys are near as powerful as Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker may land on the chin once and Claudio Puelles to be like, whoa, I haven't felt this in years, and crumble. Like you look at Dan Hooker's losses, and yeah, like he's lost 4 out of 5, but he dropped down to featherweight for some reason, lost to Arnold Allen, didn't get knocked down. They stopped that with him standing. Makhachev got subbed, but now Makhachev's the champion. Michael Chandler caught him, fine. But then he lost a 5-round war to Poirier. Like, Dan Hooker is one of the toughest dudes there is. Like, he went to absolute war with Edson Barbosa, took nasty shots, kept coming forward. If he can defend a knee bar, he's going to win this fight. Like, I know that sounds simple, but that's what it is. If he can defend a knee bar, he's going to win this fight.
And there's such a big striking difference between the two. So also just in terms of output, Puelles lands 1.99 significant strikes per minute. Hooker lands just south of 4.91. So the output for every 2 strikes that Puelles lands, I mean, we're going to see Hooker throw 5, and those are going to be sharper strikes. They're going to be a lot more powerful. And then in terms of striking defense, Puelles has 46% striking defense. That's really shitty. So I think that he's there to be hit. I think the most likely outcome in this fight is that Hooker finishes him. And at least right now, based on our ownership projections, Hooker looks like a contrarian play, and Puelles is going to be more popular of the two. I prefer the Hooker side. I think that's good leverage in tournaments as well.
Yeah, Puelles is like plus 120, so there is some pretty good odds value for him being 7,500, I think. Yeah, 7,500. It's just like, yeah, maybe he has some wrestling upside here, but like, I don't know. Like, Poirier took him down once, Makhachev took him down, so what? Like, he takes down everybody. He hasn't really faced it. Like, Puelles' wrestling, if you're rolling for knee bars, your wrestling isn't great. You're like doing weird stuff on the mat. So if Hooker can avoid, his legs and defend takedowns, I don't see how he doesn't finish Puelles here. Now it's MMA. Anything can happen, but the most likely path to victory here is Hooker finishing him at some point.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I like Hooker as a contrarian spend up option. Definitely going to be in the mix for me. I'm hardly going to get to any of Claudio Puelles, even in the So I have 300 lineups that I built for today, and I have Puelles is my lowest owned fighter right now. So if it's an early knee bar, I'm going to be definitely screwed today. But I do definitely prefer the hooker side.
For sure. I mean, the strengths of schedules are apparent like as well. So the UFC is looking to get Hooker back into a bigger limelight, I think, because he puts on fun fights and he trains at Adesanya's gym. So they want those guys to do well.
So now we've got about 17 minutes left here. If you guys haven't asked us any questions yet, throw those into the Discord channel. We can get to those. But I want to know, of the fights we haven't talked about, which ones are the highest priority to target?
Let me check it out because there's a couple that are going overlooked here. So there's Brad Riddell against Renato Moicano, and then there's Karolina Kowalkiewicz against Silviana Gomez Suarez. I think those are some pretty good ones to target. I'd be much more heavy on Renato Moicano if I knew his chin was going to hold up. I think he's a better striker, better submission grappler. I think he's got better cardio. I think that's a good fight to target because if his chin isn't there, like Riddell is just a wild man in there and he can hurt and finish Moicano. But if he can't, I think Moicano has some grappling upside here. He's been looking to his grappling more often because after he got absolutely just bombed by Rafael Fiziev, like he knows he can't take too many on the chin, so he's been looking to wrestle. He's very good at back taking. He's very good at passing guard. So I think Moicano has very sneaky submission upside here.
I like both sides of this one as well in terms of mid-range. For the most part, we've covered the fights that I want to get the most exposure to, and kind of from a fun fan standpoint, most of the fights I like the most from a DFS perspective are on the main card and on the pay-per-view, with the main event notwithstanding. Outside of the Izzy Pereira fight, like Zhang Weili, Carla Esparza, I'm overweight to that one. Poirier Chandler, I'm overweight to. I'm overweight to Frankie Edgar. I'm overweight to Dan Hooker. Riddell Moicano, I also think this is a fight that's pretty live to score well. Of all the fights that are in that mid-range, like this 8,300, 7,900, 80, 81, 81, like that range, this is my favorite one to target because it's been bet from -110 to finish inside the distance to -160. And both of them have clear advantages. If Moicano is able to get this to the ground, like you said before, I think a sub is pretty imminent in that kind of situation. If it stays on the feet, and they're trading, Moicano could knock out Riddell, but I think Riddell is very, very live to knock out Moicano in that kind of scenario. So this is another fight that I am really high on, and that kind of covers the core of fights for me. So just to summarize the ones that I am highest on: Zhang Weili, Carla Esparza, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Riddell Moicano. In terms of fights that I'm playing both sides of, I think those are all three pretty high priority fights. The one that I don't, well, actually, I'll ask you now because you just said you brought it up that you liked it as well. Karolina Kowalkiewicz against Silvana Gomez Suarez. What do you make of this fight? Because both of them are old, and I think Gomez Suarez is a lot older than a lot of people realize because she's a little bit newer to the UFC, but she is 36 years old, which is also on the older side. This is a fight that is -110 to finish inside the distance, so there's some finish equity. But what is it that you like about this fight?
I mean, Gomez is a finish or be finished. She well in her debut, right? She got really badly out wrestled by Lupi Godinez, which actually ends up being an okay loss because she's looked pretty good in UFC. Then she knocks down Vanessa Demopoulos and then gets armbarred. Then she had a brutal knockout of Liang Na. So like, assuming she doesn't get armbarred and guard here against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, like Karolina Kowalkiewicz is very, very hittable. Kowalkiewicz lands 5.38 significant strikes per minute, but she absorbs 5.59. If you're absorbing more than you're hitting, that's a problem. Her striking defense, 56%, not great. She doesn't land many takedowns here. The power advantage is to Silviana Gomez Suarez. Like, Kowalkiewicz won by submission in her last fight against Felice Herrig, where she looked really good, but she didn't land a takedown there. She defended the takedown against Herrig and kind of just fell into top position. So, like, I don't think there's much wrestling upside for Kowalkiewicz here. So this is probably going to be, a stand and trade type fight. And Kowalkiewicz is the much hittable fighter. Gomez Juarez has much more power. I think if this fight does end inside the distance, I think it comes by a knockout by Gomez Suarez.
Kovalevich has been in the UFC since 2015, and she has landed 2 takedowns over that time. I think that's a very live path to victory for her. It's just hard to expect her or project her to attempt or land takedowns when she never does it. So with that in mind, if this fight is going to stay on the feet, I do lean towards the Silvana Gomez Juarez side. I I do get a little concerned though that if she doesn't get a quick finish, that it could turn into a lower paced striking exchange that might not score all that well. So in terms of the mid range, I do think that the Riddell Moicano fight is a much better one to target. Between Gomez Juarez and Kovalevich, I do prefer the Gomez Juarez side. I think she is live for a knockout. We have a question from Andy in our Discord channel. He wants to know who our favorite underdogs are to target on FanDuel. So I don't think it's all that much different than the underdogs to look at on DK, but I'll pull it up right now and look through my build. And so for one, Frankie Edgar at $9, close to the minimum salary over on FanDuel. I think that he certainly makes sense. I think that he's undervalued in the betting market. Michael Chandler's only $10 on FanDuel, so he's the 4th least expensive fighter. If he wins, he's going to score extremely well. So that's somebody that stands out to me. One thing that's interesting, the Frivola versus Azaitar fight is aligned way differently on FanDuel than DK. So FanDuel actually has it with the more correct salaries. It's not where Frivola is super expensive. So for me, I'd say my favorites are Frivola, Michael Chandler, and Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, I think like if you're looking for possibly like on top of that, just those are my guys too. But if you're looking for like possibly a striking based decision win, Julio Arce, maybe like Montel Jackson has advantages in that fight, but I think Arce could be competitive and it might go the distance. So yeah, he's only $10 on FanDuel. Wellington Turman, if he doesn't get his head detached from his shoulders in the first 5 minutes, could possibly put Andre Petroski in some tough positions. He's hard to trust, but not many trustworthy underdogs really on any card.
We've got a super chat from the coach following up again. Thanks for the show. Good luck. Thank you, coach. And also good luck to you as well. Izzy projection dropped 8 points in the top fighters tool for anyone who did not check the update. So yeah, there was, we did run a data update a few minutes ago, and Izzy's projection did drop based on that update for anybody who was asking about it earlier on in the show. And I'm more in line now. I think the projection drop is more in line with the reasonable expectation, somewhere in the neighborhood of like low 90s fantasy points for Izzy. I think that's probably a more reasonable expectation than north of 100. Looks like we are all caught up on all the questions right now. Guys, shout out to PrizePicks, the sponsor of our show today. If you guys have not signed up at PrizePicks, click on the link below and sign up. You get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. And over at PrizePicks, you have great opportunities to make money based on the tools we have over at Stokastic.com, because we have player prop projections that are going to give you our projections and then the projected odds of each prop to go over or under the prop number over at PrizePicks. The best way that you can make money over at PrizePicks is signing up by clicking on the link, getting that deposit bonus, and then using that deposit bonus to make more money using our projection. So go check that out and make sure to sign up by clicking on the link in the description box. Now, looking at the other fights on this slate, here's the one that I think is the widest range of outcomes that I have no clue what the hell to make of it. Carlos Olberg against Nikolai Negueriano. Do you have a lean for this fight? Because I think both of them are extremely low level. I think Olberg has a lot of power on the feet. Negueriano is extremely hittable, very poor striking defense, but never seems to get hurt in his fights. Also tremendous pressure, moves forward. And we've seen Olberg gas at times in his fight. So look at the Olberg fight. Let's see, how long ago was the fight against Kennedy and Sechiku? That fight was, so the fight in 2021. Olberg landed 146 significant strikes through a round and a half, and then just had nothing left in the tank, and basically got knocked out due to exhaustion, where Sechiku was just able to land a couple of strikes and put him away. And that is something I think we run into an issue with. What happens if one of these fights get extended with Carlos Olberg, and what does his takedown defense look like? So I can't prioritize this fight because it's so low level, and I just have no clue what to make of it. And Olberg's had some stinkers. I think you can make a case for both sides, but it's not one of my favorite fights on the slate. But what are you doing with this one?
Yeah, Nikolai Negueriano has one of the best nicknames in MMA. He didn't bring it to the UFC, unfortunately, but it's the Transylvanian Pain Train. which is a great nickname. The problem is he's essentially a punching bag. He lands 3.79 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 5.7. Now he does have some takedown equity in this fight. He lands 1.1 takedowns per 15, but he's only like his takedown accuracy is only 28%. But I think this is a pretty good fight for him to use his wrestling. You saw in his last fight, he in the first round against Ihor Potieria, he weathered the storm. He took some big shots. He's got a good chin. Started taking him down in the second round, just got him out of there. Potieria just gassed. And I think that you can see a similar type deal here. It depends what Carlos Oberg shows up. If you get the Kennedy Nzechukwu, just butchered that name, Oberg fight where he landed 146 significant strikes per minute, good chance by that second round he's going to be gassed. Then you saw Oberg against Fabio Charant. That was just one of the most ugliest fights in the UFC. Landed 66 significant strikes. And then he looked pretty good against in his last fight. 15 significant strikes can knock down in a minute. So you don't really learn anything there. He didn't really get his gas tank tested. So I think if Negumereanu can take him into some deep waters and land some takedowns, I think, he has a path to victory. The problem is like Negumereanu is just a punching bag. And if Oberg comes out aggressive, I think he can get him out of there. So
just one last super chat to answer, and then we got to wrap up the show to hand it over to the NBA Live Before Lock guys. Stewie Griffin, he is a 2v2 for us. Gomez Suarez and Nikolai Negumereanu, or Frankie and Izzy. Of those combinations, I would lean towards the Frankie and Izzy side. Gomez Suarez and Negumereanu, or Frankie Edgar and Israel Adesanya.
I think it's the Frankie Edgar Israel Adesanya for me. I think Frankie's being disrespected heavily here as long as his chin holds up.
All right, that is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done it yet, do us a big favor. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around. Got NBA Deeper Dive and NBA Live Before Locker next.